Lesson 3-10, Multiplication and Division Expressions. By the end of this lesson, you will be able to write word expressions as numerical multiplication and division expressions and vice versa, as well as write word expressions as algebraic multiplication and division expressions and vice versa. Let's take a look at today's problem. It says Linda washes dogs to earn extra money on weekends. She spends 30 minutes on each dog. If she washes 5 dogs on Saturday, write an expression for the total number of minutes she spends washing the dogs. We can write that multiplication expression 3 different ways. The first would be 30 times 5, or we can write it like this, with the 30 and then a dot for the multiplication and 5, or 30 with a parentheses and the 5 inside. Those are the 3 different ways that we can write it. We can also read it different ways. We can say 30 times 5. We can say 5 multiplied by 30. Or we can also say the product of 30 and 5. These were examples of multiplication expressions without a variable. Now, if the question were to say, write an expression for the total number of minutes Linda spends washing D dogs on Sunday, that would look different because we would now have the variable D. So that would be 30 times D because we don't know how many dogs it would be. Or we can write it with the dot, 30 dot D. Or we could write it with parentheses, 30 with the D inside the parentheses. We can also take the parentheses out and write it 30D. We also can read these different ways as well. So we can say 30 times D. We could say the product of 30 and D. We could also say D multiplied by 30. One tip in math is that algebraic expressions involving multiplication commonly don't use this multiplication sign. So you usually won't see that because this x could be confused as a variable x. So we won't write it that way. We'll usually choose to focus on writing it these ways from now on. So let's take a look now at the division expressions. Linda will spend 280 minutes washing dogs next weekend. If she spends 20 minutes per dog, write an expression for the number of dogs she will wash. So we can write that 2 different ways. We can say 280 divided by 20, or we can write it as a fraction, 280 over 20, which is 280 divided by 20. These are our division expressions. Now, they gave us all of our numbers here. If they leave one out, if they want us to write an expression for the number of dogs Linda will wash if she spends M minutes per dog, we now have a variable. So that would be written using a variable. So that would look like this, 280 divided by M for the minutes, or we can write that as a fraction as well, 280 divided by M. This is also, or both of these are also division expressions. Each of these can be read as 280 divided by M, or it can be read as the quotient of 280 and M. We know quotient is the answer to a division problem. It can also be read as the result of dividing 280 by m. Have fun with today's math lesson.